Hi, and welcome back to Ron Hasn't Seen. I'm Ron, and on this channel, I go back and look at older movies, things I probably should have seen a long time ago, things I probably should have seen in film school, or things like that, and talk about them. My goal is to watch one of these a week, and this channel is just kind of my way to keep myself on track. Today, I'm in the middle of a run of 1970s movies with 1978's The Deer Hunter. This is a drama directed by Michael Cimino and written by Cimino and Derek Washburn. Stars Robert De Niro, Christopher Walken, John Savage, Meryl Streep, and is the last appearance of John Cazale. The film won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actor for Walken, Best Sound for Richard Portman, William McCauty, Aaron Rochin, and Darren Knight, and Best Editing for Peter Zimmer. It also received 4 other nominations, including Best Actor for De Niro, Supporting Actress for Streep, Best Screenplay, and Best Cinematography for Vilmos Zsigmond. The film follows 3 Russian-American steelworkers from Pennsylvania. De Niro is Mike, Walken is Nick, and Savage is Stephen. It starts on the day of Stephen's wedding, and the first act really follows the events of the wedding and the guy's last hunting trip the next day, before they're all supposed to enlist and are sent out to Vietnam. Later, we see them in Vietnam, and the 3 are captured by the Viet Cong, who force the prisoners to play Russian roulette until only the 3 of them are left. Mike convinces his captors to up the odds and put 3 bullets in the revolver instead of 1, which he then uses to shoot his captors and escape with his friends down the river. Nick is actually rescued by helicopter, but Stephen falls off, and Mike dives back into the river to save him. And after he rescues him and gets into a convoy, he's brought to Saigon. Nick is treated back at the hospital, but he's suffering from PTSD and wanders into a game of Russian roulette that they're playing for money, and he joins in. Mike's at the game, watches him, and this is kind of the last he sees of Nick for a while. Mike returns home, but is kind of avoiding the party they had planned for him. But he doesn't avoid Angela, a woman who's been living in his apartment, who he's been in love with and was Nick's fiancée. Nick was also his roommate. Nick is still missing, and Stephen is in a VA hospital after being a double amputee and losing the loss of the use of one of his arms. Stephen has been getting money and sending it to his wife. The money's been coming from somewhere in Vietnam, so they presume it's Nick, who's still AWOL, somewhere in Saigon. Mike eventually leaves to find Nick, who's now been playing Russian roulette professionally and regularly, and he's become unbeatable. He just somehow has not lost a game in years. Mike finally confronts him, starts to break through Nick's trauma a little bit, and he's also a drug-induced haze. And he finally gets to Nick just enough that Nick seems to remember one little bit, and then he pulls a trigger playing the game, and he dies. So whatever happened, his luck finally ran out. The film ends at the wake for Nick back at the bar they all frequent in Pennsylvania, and, that's the end of the movie. The movie was a huge critical success, as obviously from the amount of Oscars. It was also a hit and grossed $49 million on a roughly $15 million cost, which was actually above the budget the movie was set at. The story is actually based off an unproduced script called The Man Who Came to Play, about Russian roulette games in Vegas. Cimino and Washburn have told different versions of this story, but both agree that Washburn did a first draft working with Cimino, and then was fired, and Cimino finished the script. Cimino claims Washburn's script was deranged and all over the place, and Washburn said he was just shown the door so Cimino can grab the credit. It went to WGA arbitration, and Washburn got the screenplay credit, with Cimino getting a story credit, along with the authors of The Man Who Came to Play, Louis Garfinkel and Quinn Redeker. So I went into this movie knowing a few things. Number 1, I knew it was long, and the movie is over 3 hours. Number 2, I knew it was about Vietnam. And number 3, I know it featured Russian roulette. It's kind of on the cover, and it's just, I think, what most people seem to know about this. Maybe that was just my perception. Even though the movie is 3 hours long, you don't feel it at the end of the movie. I think the first act you feel it a little bit and could have been tightened up a bit because it's an hour before they even get to Vietnam. But there's a lot of exposition telling us who these characters are, and that needs to be there at the beginning. The second and third acts show us how the trio are changed and what they become because of their experiences in Vietnam. So we really need to know who they were at the beginning to see how their relationships fall apart and the PTSD affects them. So yeah, it's a long movie, but it really doesn't drag at the end like you'd think it would. The one thing I wasn't really expecting was this film to be almost a treatise on PTSD. I thought it was kind of a war film. And to a certain point it is, but it really goes on to tackle the subject of what happens to these guys when they get back or don't get back from a few different angles. Nick, Mike, and Steve all experience the same kind of traumas, but react to it in different ways. Nick just has completely lost himself to the trauma and the drugs. He can't seem to focus on anything. We see scenes of him, at the VA hospital, not really even talking to the doctors. He just kind of wanders off. Steve is the most injured, obviously, but he kind of ends up just wallowing in self-pity, and he's kind of ignoring his family, his wife, and the child he knows isn't his, but he was going to take responsibility for. But he's just ignoring them and just stays at the VA hospital. He's paying for them, but his wife is still almost in a catatonic state, just out of his loss. And then Mike is seemingly the most healthy, but he comes back, he's still sullen, withdrawn. He doesn't take a shot at the deer when they go hunting. He overreacts to his friends' kind of games that they used to play. So he carries this burden, and he's obviously not the same himself, and he feels guilty for what happens to the other guys, and it's clear he takes it on their responsibility. That's why he goes to get Nick out of the VA hospital and to get Steven out of the VA hospital and to get Nick out of Vietnam. He puts this on himself because he thinks it's his responsibility to what happened to them, because I think he was the one who, I don't know if he pushed them to go, but he was the one who was more gung-ho. He was the one who was more special forces while they were more infantry. And, like a lot of 70s movies, this has a darkness to it, but I was not expecting it to be this dark. I did enjoy the movie. I enjoyed the performances. With De Niro, Walken, Streep, Cazale, these are great actors, and wow, what performances out of them. Cimino, I think deserved the best director for this, even though a lot of people kind of said it was a freak after that, because his next film was Heaven's Gate, which is known as one of the biggest bombs of all time. Something I haven't seen. I don't know if I'll ever even get to that just because of its reputation. The story, while not what I expected, is good, but I don't want to watch it again. That's one of those movies where I think once is enough. I don't want to vicariously kind of feel these people's traumas, and you really do. You understand why they're so damaged, and I think none of the Vietnam movies were ever rah 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 kind of movies, especially after the war ended. But this one, I think, really, before Oliver Stone stuff, this really delved deep into how those experiences affected these people, and I think it's important for that, as well as it's just kind of its artistic merits. So I do recommend seeing it once, but I do recommend being warned about these kind of issues going into it. As I said, it's a good movie. I enjoyed watching it. I didn't like watching it. I think those are two different things you could say at times. But I do recommend it if you can kind of stomach the problem, the emotions. It's like watching a Holocaust film. It feels like that at times, with the kind of weight of the characters being so vivid. Well, that's kind of it for me and The Deer Hunter. I don't want to go on for 3 hours. And it's so heavy, I can't talk about the anything in it. There's the weight of the movie is kind of its draw. and kind of what pushes me away from seeing it again. So I do recommend it, and that's it. So thank you guys for watching this episode of Ron Hasn't Seen. If you like what I'm doing, please like below, subscribe to the channel. I try and put these out once a week for all the movies I'm seeing. And next week, we're going to be finishing up this little round of 70s movies with Serpico. So once again, thank you and good night.